Welcome back to Kareem in My English, everyone. Sorry I sound like this. I'm a little sick this week, but you know, that won't stop us from learning English. Now I know you're probably saying, Kareem, you need to go to the doctor. Kareem, you should go to the doctor. Kareem, you have to go to the doctor. And you know what? I did, and everything is fine. If you noticed, in those sentences, I said need to, should, have to. And these are what we call modal verbs of obligation. So we've talked about modal verbs of obligation. I can't even speak. I can't get my thoughts straight again. And everything is fine. Modal verbs of obligation. Modal verbs of obligation. Oh, my goodness. These modal verbs are such a hot topic. So today we're going to look at 5 modal verbs of obligation. We're going to discuss when we use them, see some examples, and the key differences between them. So without further ado, let's get on to our modal verbs. So we're going to look at the modal verbs must, have to, need to, should, and ought to. So let's look at must first. Must is at the top for a reason. It's a very strong modal verb. The point of must is to indicate that something is completely necessary. It's an obligation. It's a duty. So let's see some examples. You must finish your homework before going out with your friends. She must attend the training session tomorrow. Now, I know many English learners love to use must. However, in everyday speech, especially in the United States, must isn't as common as you think. A main reason is that must is incredibly strong and incredibly formal. And there aren't many situations where things become that serious where we use must. One situation where students use must incorrectly is with the bathroom. Saying I must use the bathroom sounds incredibly strange to a native speaker, mainly because, as I said, it's incredibly strong. But even if you have to use the bathroom, you can't hold it anymore, you still would use one of the next 2 modal verbs, need to or have to. Just like must, have to signifies a necessity, an obligation. However, this obligation can be external. External? What the hell? External means something that is out of your control, like the rules of a company or the laws of a country. Let's see 2 examples. We have to submit the reports by noon tomorrow. She has to follow the company policies if she wants to keep her job. Need to is very similar to must and have to, but one small difference is that it's very focused on necessity, requirements. When we think about a necessity or a requirement, it means it's something that needs to be or needs to be done, typically for something else to happen. So let's see some examples. Mark needs to pass all his exams if he wants to get into med school. Jennifer needs to start saving money if she wants to purchase a house. I need to take medicine if I want to feel better. Our next modal verb of obligation doesn't necessarily signify an obligation. That's should. Should is used for recommendations, suggestions, advisability on something. I like to tell my students, should is like, if you do it, okay. If you don't do it, okay. It really doesn't matter because it's just a recommendation. If you want it to be something obligatory, you would use must, have to, or need to. So let's see 2 examples. You should be more mindful of what you say because this is a very sensitive subject. Kareem, you should go to the doctor before you get everyone sick. Our last phrasal verb, which is one of our more unique ones, is ought to. Ought to and should are both very similar in that they are both used for suggestions and recommendations. But it can be said that ought to can also be used for a moral obligation. A moral obligation is a feeling that you must do something because it is the right thing to do. So let's see some examples. I know you didn't mean it, but you ought to apologize for those awful things you said to her. You ought to consider the consequences before making your decision. All right, now that we've discussed 5 modal verbs of obligation, I've said it right, I said it right this time, we're going to do a quick practice. I'm going to show you several sentences. I want you to complete them with the correct modal verb of obligation. Now, be mindful, there can be more than one answer. Once you are ready, pause the video and complete the activity. Once you have finished, unpause and we'll check your answers together. Are you ready? Pause the video. Hey guys, I have to say, nice work today. We've looked at these modal verbs of obligation, we've got some practice in, and now you're probably masters at using them. But before we finish, let's recap what we did today. We looked at 5 modal verbs of obligation: must, have to, need to, should, and ought to. Some key differences are in strength. Must and have to are much stronger than should, ought to, and even need to at times. Should and ought to signify recommendations, suggestions, while must, have to, and need to can represent obligations, necessity, and duty. Must is very formal and strong and not used in everyday speech. It's preferable to use need to or have to instead of must in most situations. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, you have to hit that like button. And if you want more English content, you must hit that subscribe button because I upload videos every Friday. However, if you do want more English content, you should also follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at Kareem in My English. I upload content on a daily basis, helping you become a better English speaker. So everyone, thanks for watching. Stay healthy, keep working hard, and I'll see you in the next one. Whew.